There's my wonderful victory garden so far. Lots of seedlings. And James it looks like he's talking about Greek English. And he's gonna eat some more pizza and salad, chocolate milk and grapes. And he's gonna talk to you about that stuff while I put my seedlings back in the house for the night.
So, Greek English. This is kind of like a preview. I'm working my way through all these entries here. There's lots. They've actually, I think, got a better one at the library. It's downtown library. My library for stuff that actually counts is way better than the downtown library, and for stuff that counts to me. It's like Acadian, and that's not for music, dancing or whatever, and Maple Leaf Pies. That's the language that the ancient Babylonians and ancient Assyrians used to use. The Assyrians are kind of still around. I think they weren't totally wiped out by ISIS. I want you to know that Islam is supposed to be at least a tolerant religion, but you know, they've been doing genocide in the 21st century, certain representatives, and you know, like the Germans will always have to look down the Holocaust. You don't judge a culture by its prism of best moments, it's its worst moments. Yeah. Doing genocide in the 21st century. Shameful. That's ISIS. Al-Qaeda's not much better. I think Al-Qaeda's kind of semi-ashamed by ISIS behavior, but you know, to say that ISIS or Al-Qaeda practically has no shame by the worst single act of terrorism in peacetime ever in the world, from what I can tell. That's interstate kind of terrorism, the kind of terrorism that Stalin and Mao conducted was freaking incredible, and their own citizens. Absolutely shameful, disgusting. And you had all sorts, and many of them are still alive, all sorts of apologies for communism, dating back to all the way through its sordid history. And even now, you know, communism, capitalism, who can choose? But, you know, when you look at the Cold War, they were choosing communism, these apologists for communism, every freaking time. And I'm talking about your standard social democrat. You know, like Nicaragua, awesome. You listening, Bono? You know, ask the people who survived on the Mosquito Coast what they think of Ortega, Daniel Ortega. Oh, Fidel Castro, kind of misunderstood. Yeah, you know, how many people did he kill in the 60s? 50,000? Oh, that's chicken feed. Yeah, you know, how many dissidents did the Americans kill in the 60s? I don't know if they killed more. You know, like the Black Panthers. Yeah, well, they were freaking well armed to the teeth. They were revolutionary terrorists, with emphasis on terrorists. Whereas with Fidel Castro, those would be people who died in jail. Bullet to the back of the head, whatever. 50,000, about 5,000 a year. If you think about it, you know, how many is that per day? Well, it's like more than 10 per day. Pretty ambitious. The ghost of Fidel, wherever you are. I don't think you're upstairs. And, yeah, I don't think you'd make it to Catholic purgatory. Stupid people. So yeah, I bring this out because one of these days I'm going to be bringing in something that I've reviewed as a preview. Get ready. You know, there are all sorts of people out there. Presumably no one is listening, watching, listening to this show, because there'd be much weeping and gnashing of teeth when they heard what I had to say. And it's a matter of fact. There's actually things like facts in this life. You know, facts aren't relative. And so there are lots of folks strutting around, especially in the halls of our ivory tower institutions. Oh, truth is relative. Okay, interpretations of facts, you can say they're relative. But, you know, you gotta have some sort of facts to base things on. If you don't, you end up in Trump territory and Antifa territory. And you Antifa folks that think you know what doesn't stink, but everyone else's does. Yeah. Anyway, going through the Greek New Testament, and that's what the New Testament was actually written in Greek. So all you fundamentalist folks that think the King James Version or whatever other, the New Jehovah's Witnesses, New World Translation, I think that's what they call their own translation of the Bible, not just the New Testament. Yeah. You got to go back to the original document. And as I was saying a while back, and keep on hearing it, I've actually translated half of all the book of Exodus. That was a bit of a chore. And substantial portions actually of the book of Genesis. The whole book, it's not very long, of Ruth. The whole book of Esther, again, not very long, not like Genesis and Exodus. That's all of them, all of the chapters in those last two books of Hebrew scripture, or the Old Testament, as Christians tend to style. Yeah. But going through, I'm trying to get through all. I tend to do it when I'm getting a treatment. I get the treatments once every, roughly, month. It's every 4 weeks. And so I'm just going through line by line. I'm actually writing in every word, translating stuff like that. So when I say I'm going through it, I'm not good enough to read it actually, but I'm studying it and translating it. Yeah. So, there are all sorts of people who say all sorts of things about Christianity, and they're not just flunkies out of the university, they're Christians themselves. And, don't feed me lies. Don't feed me lies. There's more lies told about the Old Testament, but there's more content there, but there are lies told about the New Testament and stuff like that. Yeah, that's in the originals. Okay, good. Now, you folks who are Donald Trump supporters, I don't think too many will be watching, because by now they know what I think of this guy. He's been going around calling our leader, who I don't think that highly of, Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, Governor of Canada. Well, so Trump buddy, you're watching. I'm calling you not the commander-in-chief, commissar-in-chief, okay? And you flunkies that are serving him, your little acolytes and stuff like that, are not even serving a president. He's a vassal of the Soviet Union at best, or Russia, whatever you want to call it or not call it. You're just little apparatchiks. So you folks who don't understand what that is, what it means, look it up. It starts with apparatus without the U.S. and then put chick on the end. See what it is. Apparatchiks. That's what you flunkies are. Mitch McConnell finally decided he had enough of doing 4 years of being an apparatchik for ultimately for Vladimir Putin, and he pulled the plug. He's going to keep on serving in the Senate. You know, he's gone a long way to enabling Donald Trump even before Trump came along, like allowing Trump to stop the Supreme Court by blocking Obama from appointing a Supreme Court candidate. Allowed Trump to just stuff it. I think it's 6-3 now. It could be 5-4. But that huge majority for Trump's supporters, Republican appointees and stuff like that. Trump would be able to ram through whatever happened. Now, I keep on hearing stuff on the radio. What's Trump doing? It doesn't make sense. The stock market's going down, and he's not. You know, Trump and Bernie Sanders are not in it for the money. They're in it for their slimy skins. The same thing with Rupert Murdoch. He's not in it for the money. He's in it for his slimy skin. Now, they do get lots of money, all three of those guys. Of course, Bernie Sanders is reporting when it was 2018, he's worth something like over $2 million. That's his own accounting. Okay? And on the sale of a book. Now, I've seen a book, The Speech. I don't know if that's a thing out there. It's supposed to be a huge, big seller, and he's supposed to make a huge amount of money out of it. I'm highly skeptical. He just got money from the Russian mob. With Donald Trump, I gather the Russian mob bailed him out. What is it, $4 billion? He was in debt for $4 billion. And now he's floating in money. It's blood money, basically. Disgusting. And Rupert Murdoch, he got bailed out. He's one of the first to get bailed out by the Russian mob. I think it was after the fall of the Soviet Union. It might have been just as the Soviet Union was falling. I think it was sometime in August. His little business was going belly up, and some wee little bank was the only one that would lend to him. A little bank. It wasn't a little bank. It was a little front for the Russian mob. Rupert Murdoch, especially Fox Network, but on his other slimy Wall Street Journal, stuff like that, been pounding the drums for Putin and Trump. And for Bernie Sanders. And people, why is Bernie Sanders the only, this is a bad one, the only Democratic candidate who's been featured on Fox? You know, one person recently, he's reasonably intelligent, he's not as intelligent as he thinks, was saying, when I mentioned that Bernie Sanders was a Russian agent, oh, that can't be. Trump and he are the very opposite. I don't know. Depends on what you're measuring in terms of opposite. The analogy I use is electrons, neutrons, and protons. What are the opposite? Oh, the obviously is electrons and neutrons, because they're opposite in sign of charge. Positive, negative, and neutrons are just in the middle way. But you see, how about mass? Mass, not charge, mass. Because that's another thing that you measure. It's a, you know, like a, it's a characteristic of matter, with mass. I don't know if you could say electricity is a charge is a characteristic of matter, but we'll say it is. It's a different form of matter. Okay. What's the opposite? Well, basically, neutrons and protons are almost the exact opposite, not quite, of electrons. Electrons do have mass, but it's very, very small, and protons and neutrons have huge mass by comparison with the electrons. But there is a slight difference. Neutrons have a slightly larger mass than protons. But then let's look at strength of charge. Neutrons, theoretically at least, have no charge at all. Zero. And then you've got electrons and neutrons, which have basically exactly the same strength of charge. So in terms of strength of charge, neutrons are the opposite of both electrons and protons. And that's what we have here with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. they're like protons and neutrons in terms of charge. They're the exact opposite. But in terms of extremism, they are the exact opposite of neutrons. And neutrons are the folks in the United States, here in Canada too, that are the only people that are really worth dealing with. People who are on the extremes, NDP and Pierre Poilievre and his ilk, Danielle Smith here in Alberta, they're absolutely useless. And I mean that about the NDP. I'm a former... I can remember being asked by a member of the NDP who was kind of like this with some of the people who were leading it, not so much misleading back then. I was actually asked by him, it wasn't official, to run for the NDP locally here in Alberta. I'm not into politics. I shouldn't have to be doing this sort of stuff. People should be able to analyze. I've got other more important things to deal with. Or things that should be more important, but unfortunately people have decided to make politics important. Politics should be boring. It should be two parties basically striving to go for that, what they see as a huge pig slop in the middle of the political electorate. Instead, you got people just going off to extremes. My way or the highway to hell. So here's the key or clue to understanding Donald Trump. You notice how the stock market has been kind of tanking the last while. Hey, you stock market investors, anyone who thinks you're intelligent aside from Warren Buffett, as investors, absolute fools. You keep on having stock market crashes. But if ever you were going to have a stock market crash, you should have had one back in November when stock markets traditionally happen sometime after the fall equinox is when they traditionally tend to happen. I don't know if they've ever had one in spring. But you should have had one back then. Now, I don't think you guys are going to have one, but Trump is not there to make America great. It's to make again. It's to make America a colony again, and to make America gross. But it's really to ruin the United States. That's the idea with Putin supporting both Sanders and Trump. He wants to, the ideal would be for the United States to have a civil war. Putin wants to play, and he is playing, divide and conquer. He's doing the same thing in Europe. Now, the powers that be in Europe, aside from Hungary, are basically vis-a-vis, let's say, the United States, left-wing. And they have been that way, thank heavens. Even idiots like Macron and I almost call him Sarkozy. They're relatively left-wing, basically because their populace won't put up with too much right-wing stuff. So what he's been doing is supporting Orban, whatever his name is in Hungary, got him in power there and stuff like that. But he's not terribly interested, for example, in having alternative for Deutschland come to power. What? Yeah, I thought he was supporting, all these right-wing movements. Yeah, he is. But, the last thing he wants to see is another Nazi regime in power in Germany. Okay? Newsflash, Germany's could have, I don't know, it's got half the population of the Soviet Union, but it would have, I think, per capita, or Russia, it would have maybe, let's say 5 times the per capita GDP, could be 6 times. No, what does that mean? Half the population, but 6 times, it's 3 times, possibly 3 times more powerful economically than all of Russia. And so what Trump has done is kind of done Putin's willing. He's separating himself from the European Union. The European Union, without an American guarantee of security from Russia or other places. Almost done?
9 minutes.
9 minutes. The European Union is not going to sit there without nuclear weapons. You listening, Trump? Are you listening, Putin? You stupid puto. If you know Spanish, I apologize to you, because that's kind of like it's a 4-letter word. Puto. That's the way it goes. I'll say putain. Yeah, that's a little bit of French. Yeah. Okay. Slight change in gender, I guess, but that's the way it goes. Anyway. So Putin is good at tactics when it comes to battle. It's just, like terrorism, state terrorism. No, it works. Ask the Chechens. Ask the Georgians. Didn't quite work in Syria. But that's the problem with Putin. Militarily, he's not nearly as smart as he thinks he is. And I'm talking about strategy, especially long-term strategy. We might call it diplomacy. A smart leader doesn't get involved in a war he or she can't win. Ask Bismarck. He got involved. He didn't get involved in a huge number of wars. He just won a limited war with Austria. He didn't want to take over Austria the way Hitler did. Hitler wanted it, he did it. And stuff like that, kind of like a limited war with France. He beat France and forced them to have something like a democracy on his terms. But he didn't take it over. And he took over he could have taken over Denmark, but he didn't. He just took over a bit of disputed land, contested land. So Bismarck, left. He created the German Empire with Second Reich, I guess it's called. Third Reich is Hitler. Didn't last long. It's supposed to be the 1,000-year Reich. It was a dozen-year Reich. I thought I was being original when I came up with that little formulation. It turned out someone did that. Came up with it well before I did. The dozen-year Reich. That's what it was, 33 to 45. But yeah, Putin. He doesn't understand in the long term if he splits, as he's doing pretty successfully, the United States from Europe in terms of security guarantees and stuff like that. The Europeans are not going to be without nuclear weapons. And if you get Alternative for Deutschland in power in Germany, squatting on nuclear weapons, they'll be harking back to Hitler. What was Hitler's idea? Lebensraum. And where was that? The Slavic areas, in particular Russia. Now that little thing will be. Putin, are you listening? You aren't nearly as smart as you think you are. Same sort of thing if you end up with, Trump's not going to last forever. If you manage to get the military in the United States in power in the United States, they're going to be nationalistic. You won't be able to control them anymore. There won't be some sort of democratic figurehead for you to corrupt, subvert. And understand, they have military intelligence. The Central Intelligence Agency is supposed to be a coordinating agency, as I understand it, for the various intelligence, military and other intelligence agencies, like the Army Intelligence Agency, the Office of Navy Intelligence, ONI, and they know perfectly well what you've been doing in terms of supporting Trump, and they know about Bernie Sanders too. You'd better be ready to put the brakes on. There's a military in the United States, like some of them might take, some supporter of Donald Trump might, like Mike Flynn, like it's understood that he was corrupted by Putin. but there'd be ones that would be relatively uncorruptible, but wouldn't believe in democracy and stuff like that. So who's going to take over? Like, will it always be someone like Mike Flynn? I don't think they'd let Mike Flynn or one of his ilk take over the American military. They'd just declare martial law, put democracy on hold, and it could be forever, and put Donald Trump and a variety of different individuals, Rupert Murdoch, up on. It'd be military tribunals. The trials wouldn't be public. And they'd just no, it wouldn't be life imprisonment. It would be death penalty for treason. Putin is, he has no clue about what he's getting involved in. The United States, like a nationalist, militaristic United States with nuclear weapons, they wouldn't put up with Putin controlling them. Jesus H. God. Sorry for cussing the Christians out there, but yeah. How much time was that?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. So this is what's motivating Trump. He's actually there to tear the United States apart.
Okay.
He might not realize it. No one ever accused him, and no one with any sort of sense and intelligence would ever accuse Trump of being intelligent. But he's there to tear the United States apart. Now, all the stuff where people saying, that doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. What he's doing, what he's saying, from Putin's point of view. He's getting fed his lines and his role and his actions on stage, on the world stage, and the domestic stage, but particularly in the world stage, from Putin. Every little thing has been plotted out. Same thing with Rupert Murdoch and stuff in his little publications and on his little platform, Fox News, particular Fox Network, but particularly Fox News. It's all being fed by Putin. So Putin does fear the American army taking over. So I was just earlier this year, maybe even before Trump took power, about the same time. The American army, I think it was the Globe, it was something like plans to kill off 20 million American citizens. Was it 20,000 or 20 million? I can't remember. But 20,000, bad enough. American army. Yeah, that is fake news. Okay, big capital letters, real fake news. But that was in anticipation of a possible move by the military to take over the United States, have a coup, and ostensibly, sometimes in Latin America, they'll have a military coup and they'll actually reinstate democracy. Anyone who thinks that there's a democracy in the United States right now in power is just out of their head wacko. I'm fairly certain that this last election was stolen in the battleground states. Like it looks as though Trump swept them all, as he did in 2016, anything that mattered. So the Russians have been very canny. They wouldn't cheat in New York, California. They just cheat in places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those kind of places. They're economical with their cheating. And of course the Republicans set the table for them. Here